All right, what's going on, everyone? Good morning. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing great. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments if you're tuning in. I'd love to give you a shout out. Hope everybody's doing great. Let me. I'm just gonna go to the live stream myself to make sure I am in business. Yes, looks like I am. So, folks, let me know. Let me know if you're tuning in. Hit like, put in the comments, and I'd be happy to give you a shout out. Let me know how everybody's doing, and hope everybody's doing great. I see some likes coming in. And I'm just going to give it a few minutes as well for people to start tuning in. And look, every Wednesday I go live. Every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, I go live and I speak about job search topics that'll help all of you in your job search, or those of you who are actively looking for work, and share my thoughts coming from a recruiter, someone who's worked in the recruitment industry on the staffing agency side, and share my thoughts and perspective and help all of you out in your job search. I see some comments coming in, I believe. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, Aditya. Hey, Aditya. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you're doing great, Aditya. Hope you're keeping well as well. Yeah, I'm pretty much keeping safe so far, Aditya. All good. Hope everything's great at your end. Ajayan, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope everything's good with you as well, Ajayan. And I'll just give it a few more minutes. Not a few more minutes. Probably maybe 30 seconds or so for people to start tuning in. But let me know in the comments. And by the way, let me know all of your job search comments. What I'm going to be speaking about today is 4 tips in relation to your approach to your interviews, right? As a candidate, as a job seeker, whatever your field is. Gurkirat says, hello, I have a telephonic interview with the HR in half an hour. Any tips? So usually I answer the questions at the end, Gurkirat, but absolutely I understand your phone interview is in half an hour. So Gurkirat, real quick, phone interview tips. What you want to do is make sure you're in a distraction-free environment. Make sure you have a strong network signal on your cell phone. I'm assuming you're doing the phone interview on your cell phone. Make sure your battery is full of juice. You have that battery going on. You're not going to worry about your battery running out during the phone call. Again, distraction-free, noise-free. If you're seated at a computer, have your resume open in front of you. Have the job description open in front of you. Also, make sure, Gurkirat, you've researched the company. You're familiar with their, you don't have to go in too depth, but have an idea about what the company does, what their products, services, and solutions are. And other than that, keep in mind on the phone interview, all you pretty much have is your tone of voice, right, Gurkirat? So make sure you project your voice. Make sure you convey your personality with your voice. Because again, the visual aspect is not there. So make sure you use your tone of voice to convey your personality and who you are, and express that enthusiasm and excitement and interest in the role. So just some basics tips there, Gurkirat. So hope that helps. Amir, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in, and great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Priya, thanks so much for tuning in. I see who else is here? Deepak tuning in. Thanks so much for tuning in. So, folks, I'm going to get this session started. And again, thanks so much for everyone tuning in. And what I'll be speaking about today, again, is having the right approach and mindset for your interviews. Now, before I get to that, 2 quick announcements. So, announcement number 1, for those of you in the tech space or with interest in the technology space or information technology, every Tuesday, I release a new episode of my weekly series, Tech Talks with the Tech Recruiter. So not last week, but yesterday I released this week's episode, and it's with an expert in the data analytics space. I interviewed Sajid Patan, who I've been in touch with for a few years, and he's the founder of a great analytics group called the Canadian Analytics Collaborative. So those of you with an interest in data analytics, check out my interview with Sajid. I released it yesterday. You should see it on my LinkedIn profile. We're talking about data analytics, the importance of being data-driven, why organizations need to be data-driven, the roadmap for getting good at data analytics. So great conversation. Make sure you check it out if you haven't already. Announcement number 2, make sure you tune in and tune into my profile tomorrow, Thursday, June 4th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time zone. I'm gonna be going live with my new friend Diana YK Chan. She is a job search coach, a career coaching expert, a former recruiter at Google, and also has in the past recruited for staffing agencies as well. So we're gonna have a conversation tomorrow. Again, tomorrow, Thursday, June 4th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time zone here in Toronto. So make sure you mark your calendars, guys, because LinkedIn doesn't always provide the notifications, right? So I want to make sure all of you tune into that conversation. I'm going to be asking her pretty much anything and everything job search related. We're going to be talking about job search tips and advice, adjusting in this current environment with COVID-19. We're going to be talking interview tips. We're going to be talking how to stand out when you're applying for roles for companies such as Google, where she was working at. Highly competitive, right? Highly competitive environment. Like, how do you separate yourself from hundreds, maybe thousands of other candidates that are trying to get into this a popular organization? Doesn't have to be Google, could be another large size organization that you guys might be applying for. So I'm going to be asking her, hey Diana, like, how do candidates stand out in such an environment? So make sure, guys, it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Make sure you tune in again tomorrow, Thursday, June 4th, 2:30 p.m. Mark your calendars, because again, LinkedIn does not always provide the notification. So mark your calendar, 2:30 p.m. If you don't get the notification 2:30 p.m. sharp tomorrow, just go to my profile, and if you go to the activity section, it should say, hey, Dean is live and whatever. So then make sure you tune in, and Diana's going to answer all your job search related questions, and it's going to be a great conversation. So make sure you tune in. We're going to be starting 2:30 p.m. sharp, folks. So make sure you tune in that time. So without further ado, today's topic, and I do see some comments here. Gurkirt says, awesome. Thank you so much. No worries, Gurkirt. All the best on your phone interview. I hope you ace it and just impress the heck out of the people. Nikhil, hey, Nikhil, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. Approach is everything. Absolutely. Nikhil says the approach is everything for your interviews. Absolutely. Again, folks, any job search questions you have, any interview questions, because we're talking about interviews today, put it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. But let's get right into the meat of it. So what I wanted to speak about today, and what inspired today's particular topic, is like, what I'm finding is a lot of job seekers, a lot of you are reaching out to me and saying, hey, Dean, how do I answer this? What do I say if the interviewer asks me this question? How do I respond if they say this? How do I respond if I say that? Now, certainly, folks, you definitely want to be practicing how you're responding to certain common interview questions you're getting, right? Now, that being said, before we even get to how to respond to something, I want all of you to have the right mindset and approach in your interviews. So I'm going to be speaking about 4 tips, right? Now, tip number 1, and I've written it down in my notes here. And by the way, you want to be taking notes. If you're actively on the market, if you're interviewing, you want to be taking notes today. So make sure you have your notepad and your whatever note-taking app you have. So tip number one, and those of you in IT who are in IT and might be business analysts or project managers or developers, you totally understand where I'm coming from with tip number 1. And tip number 1 is, I want you to think of the interview as more like a discovery conversation. Like, you're trying to discover what the actual project is, what the problem is, and what the client is looking to solve, right? And a lot of you are not doing this because you're thinking of the interview as an interview, and which is obviously, is the case. But you need to take more of the mindset that, okay, you're going in for a discovery session. You're trying to discover what the client's needs are. The client, in this case, being the interviewer, the organization, the place where you want to work. So start thinking of it like a discovery conversation, folks. And again, for those of my friends in project management, who are business analysts, in IT, program management, even the developers, actually, software developers, you go through these discovery meetings where you're meeting with the client and you're trying to discover what the needs are, what the requirements are, what exactly they're looking to accomplish. This is the approach, folks, you need to be taking. And so I want you to start thinking of your interviews. Don't think of them as interviews. Think of them as discovery conversations. And it's just like what you're doing in your regular work. And whatever your role is, actually, for the most part, you probably do come across this at some point where you're having this discovery conversation in terms of understanding what the client's needs are, what are they trying to accomplish, what is their budget, what problem are they looking to solve, what's the timeline. You have that conversation trying to discover and understand these things before you provide your solution, right? And the same thing applies to your interviews, folks. Priyanka, hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate that. Dhruti, thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate that. Folks, put in the comments. Let me know any of your job search questions. But that's tip number 1, folks. Treat the interview as a job seeker, as a candidate. Treat your interviews like it's a discovery conversation. That's the mindset I want you to have. You're going in to have a conversation with the client being the interviewer or the organization looking to hire someone, and go in with that attitude that you're looking to discover what the who, what, when, where, why is in relation to this position that you're interviewing for. So that's tip number 1, which brings me to tip number 2. You want to, folks, and please write this down because this is extremely important in terms of your mindset. You need to take an investigative approach at your interviews, right? And now the metaphor I like to use, and what I've been using so far is I always tell people, don't treat the interview like an interview, treat it like a sales presentation, as a sales meeting. And that's the metaphor I've always gone by. Now that being said, I realize that most of you might not have worked in sales, so you might not understand how that process might look like. So the other example I can think of is, look, think of yourself as a detective or a private investigator. You're investigating a crime scene. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be asking questions. You're going to be interviewing people. You're going to be probing, investigating, figuring out, okay, what's the motive? What happened? What's the evidence that's around the scene? That's more so the mindset you need. And hey, I see Diana, who's gonna be my guest tuning my guest on my show tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Diana says, "Hey Dean, having a winning mindset is key when going for interviews." Absolutely. And folks, again, Diana will be my guest tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Do not miss it. Tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time zone, which is June 4th. Tomorrow, she's gonna be my guest. We're gonna be talking about job search. We're gonna be talking about her time working in recruitment again at Google, as well as staffing agencies. She's going to be providing advice on how to stand out to recruiters. We're going to be talking about building confidence. We're going to be talking about networking, how to network effectively. So everybody say hi to Diana. She's in the comments right now, and make sure you connect with her. Make sure you follow with her. She puts a lot of content that I definitely agree with. And again, we come from similar backgrounds, but Diana also has that experience working in corporate recruitment. So make sure you follow her, folks. Make sure you connect with her. Super approachable, super friendly. Diana, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So it's in the comments right there. And again, folks, make sure you put in your calendars. Myself and Diana, we're going live tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time zone. Diana, thanks so much for tuning in and saying hi to everyone. Everyone, make sure you connect with Diana, and looking forward to that. So again, going back to the tip, folks, what I was speaking about, and tip number 2 is, again, you need to take that investigative approach in your interviews, and think of yourself. And the example I was giving is, look, think of yourself like a private investigator, as a detective. You're investigating a crime scene. What are you going to do? You're not going to go to the crime scene and right away say, yeah, you know what? This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. And, so-and-so's guilty. Like, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to go in. You're going to be asking questions. You're going to be interviewing people. You're going to be finding out like different motives of all the people in. And you know what? Let me give you an even better, more relatable example. Visiting a doctor. What happens when you visit the doctor? So you need to think of yourself as a doctor in diagnosing a patient. Now, when we go to the doctor, what happens there? Right? The doctor does not say, "Hey, Dean, welcome, have a seat. All right, Dean, so, this is, I've been a doctor for 10 years, 15 years. I've studied at so-and-so school. I've diagnosed, coughs and flus and this and that. From the looks of it, looks like you have, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm going to prescribe you this medication." That's not how it works, folks. And a lot of you are taking this approach at your interviews. You're just kind of blurting out your experience and all that, which is still important, which is still good. But think about what the doctor does. The doctor does not start just blurting out and stuff like that. He or she definitely speaks about themselves and what they do and their experience and all that. Maybe that does come into play. But what the doctor does do, hey, Arjun, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate the comment. Arjun is another great person to follow, folks. Arjun says, these lives are life-changing to many individuals. Dean, I love your consistency. Hey, I really appreciate that, Arjun. I really appreciate the acknowledgement, and thank you so much for tuning in. But going back to what I was saying, folks, you need to think of it like this. So what does the doctor really do when you come in, when you visit the doctor? What do? They sit you down, make sure you're comfortable, all that. What they do next? They try to understand your situation. They try to understand and diagnose what the problem is, like what's happening. They're going to be, if I go to the doctor, they're like, okay, Dean, so, what's the problem here? Well, doctor, I'm feeling a little, sore throat over here. Okay, now how long has it been happening, Dean? How long has that been happening? Well, it's been for about a week or so. Okay, did you eat something? Did you drink something? Were you exposed to something cold, or were you in front of someone or interacting with someone who had a cold or a cough? Like, the doctor's going to be asking these questions, folks. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is, are you doing the same thing at your interviews? No, I'm not saying you want to get right into asking a whole bunch of questions right away. That's not my point. But I want you to remember this analogy. You are at the interview as a job seeker. You are, metaphorically, you are the doctor diagnosing a patient. That's what you're doing. That's the approach you need to take. You need to put more effort into understanding what the problem is. Why is the organization looking to hire for the position? Why are they looking to hire for the position right now? What are they, what's happening in the project right now? What problem are they looking to solve? What's the timeline? What are the skill sets? Why are those skill sets important? Why in particular those skill sets? What are the top 3 skill sets? What if this skill set is available, but what if they don't have someone with that skill set? Who are the current people working on the team? Why can't they do the project themselves? Why do you need an additional person on the project? Like, these are all the questions over the course of the conversation, folks, you need to be asking, and you need to be taking that investigative approach. Now, I totally understand most of us when you're going for interviews, sorry, excuse me, most of us going for interviews, we're so stressed out. We're like, oh my God, I need to nail this interview. I need to get this interview right. I need, if I don't get this, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to, put food on the table? All these things are going to be running through your mind. And I totally get that. And it's totally normal, by the way. And don't feel bad about feeling that way. But I want you to, while at the same time, you don't want to suppress that. You want to acknowledge the fact that, all that is definitely there. Folks, you still need to stay calm, stay logical, stay rational, and understand and remember the analogy. You are the doctor. The company is the patient. You are there to diagnose the problem. You're there to understand what problem they're experiencing. And understanding that problem, folks, that's how you prescribe the solution and show how you are the person to prescribe the solution, right? And that's the approach you need to take. And Miriam, I see that you have a question. I will get around to the questions shortly. So, folks, any questions you have, feel free to put it in the comments. I will be getting into the questions. So that's the approach you need to be taking, folks. Like, you need to diagnose the problem, and that's what you need to do at your interview. So, and this is why it's important to prepare your own questions so that, again, you do not have to wait until the end to ask your questions. It needs to flow like a back and forth, like a conversation. Maybe they say, hey, so-and-so, thanks for coming in. Tell us about yourself. So then you go ahead, you tell them about yourself. Then you can open it up with a question of your own. You can say, hey, I appreciate your time. And, I definitely wanted to find out, why are you looking to hire for this position at this time? Like, what's kind of urgent for you, for the person in this role to get done right now? You ask a question, then they answer that, then they ask their own question. It should go back and forth like that, like a conversation, folks. A lot of you are going there, you're sitting down, you're just answering a whole bunch of questions. Then you're asking all your questions right at the end, when it might be too late now to further highlight why you're the perfect person for the role. So you need to take this investigative approach throughout the conversation, throughout the interview. So that's tip number 2. Now, tip number 3. And this goes back to what a lot of you are reaching out to me. You're like, Dean, the interviewer asked me this. How do I respond to that? The interviewer asked me that. How do I respond to that? Which is great. You definitely want to have practiced responses for certain things. But something important, folks, which all of you need to understand and write down is, when you're at the interview, when you're diagnosing what the problem is, why the company is looking to hire and all this stuff, and the question you need to ask yourself is, are you listening to respond? Or are you listening to understand, folks? This is so key. Please write this down. Listen to understand. Do not listen to just respond. Listen to understand. Do not listen to just respond. When you're listening, when you're asking a question from the employer, from the interviewer, I want you to listen in order to understand. Put the focus on understanding what they're saying, not just on responding, like saying something witty or smart or intelligent. Yeah, of course, that's important, folks. I'm not saying it's not important to respond intelligently. But what you want to do is you want to really understand what they're saying. What's their problem? What's their pain point? You need to have that. And look, most of you are doing this already in your day-to-day lives, in your jobs, right? If you're working as a business analyst, if you're working as a project manager, as a software developer, even as a systems administrator, what are you doing first, guys? You're already doing this. Like, I'm not telling you anything magical or new. This is something you're already doing. These are the very principles that make you successful and helped you build a successful career already. What are you doing in your day-to-day jobs? Or if you're not unemployed, when you were working before, you're first understanding the problem. That's what you're doing. And this is exactly what you need to be doing at your interviews. But a lot of you're getting anxious and nervous and excited, and you're forgetting that. So, folks, that's the other thing. When you ask a question and you're getting a response, listen to understand. First and foremost, listen to understand. Write this down, please. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it on your wall even if you have to. And remind yourself of that. You need to understand it. And if you don't show that you're looking to understand, the interviewer's problem, the company's problem, the organization's problem, what they want to accomplish, why they want to resolve this issue, you're not really going to connect with them. Because look, folks, the best way to connect with someone, the best way to build rapport with someone is to show them how you can help them solve their problem. frankly, I mean, and that's coming from myself working as a recruiter. You can talk about weather, you can talk about the sports, you can talk about COVID-19, you can talk about all that stuff going on. I mean, yeah, sure, you can definitely relate and connect with people in that way. But folks, in the context of a business conversation, okay, where an organization is looking to hire someone to help solve a problem, the best way to connect with them, the best way to build rapport is to first of all understand what they're experiencing, what they're going through, what they're looking to resolve, and then showing how you can help speak to that problem, how you can resolve that problem. So that's the next tip, folks. Listen to understand. Don't just listen to respond. Listen to understand. And you might have to, ask follow-up questions after their response so you can better understand. And you need to show that genuine enthusiasm for understanding what this person's problem is, what their business problem is, how it's affecting them, and why they need someone to help them out with it, and how you can potentially be the person to help them out with it. And by the way, asking these probing questions will help you better sell yourself as the ideal person for the role. I guarantee that. And moving on to the next tip, and I kind of already touched on this. Do not wait until the very end, folks, to ask your questions. You need to be asking your question. Again, it has to flow like a conversation. You need to be asking your questions throughout the conversation so that by the time you reach the end, you just need to ask maybe some minor follow-up questions and stuff. But throughout your conversation, you've been asking clarifying questions. And these clarifying questions have opened up further options and opportunities for you yourself to sell yourself on why you're the ideal person for the role, right? And because it's gone back and forth like a conversation as well, it feels more natural. It doesn't feel like an interview. You've done your part. You probed into what they're looking for. You've taken an investigative approach. You approached it like a doctor analyzing, the patient, and then by the time it gets to the end, you're able to prescribe a very accurate solution for how the company, how the organization, how the team, how the manager, how the hiring team can solve or go about solving the problem that they're looking to solve. So those are the tips, folks. I hope that was helpful. I hope those of you taking notes were taking notes, but I'm just going to summarize it once more, and then we're going to go into the Q&A. So tip number one was to think of the interview as a discovery session, right? For those of you who are again, project managers, business analysts, maybe developers, maybe, whatever field you're in, right? There's always a phase whereby you first and foremost understand the customer's or the client's problem, right? Because if you don't understand the problem, you can't provide a solution. So that's tip number one. Think of it as think of the interview conversation. Think of it as a discovery session. Tip number two is take an investigative approach. And the metaphor or the example I used is think of yourself when you're going in for the interview as a job seeker. Think of yourself as the doctor, as a doctor visiting a patient. You're diagnosing the problem. You're diagnosing the illness. Because if you don't diagnose it, if you don't ask questions and understand what the illness is, how are you going to prescribe something? You can't prescribe anything. It's impossible, because if you don't do that, you're just throwing prescriptions at people. Like that could be some real issues, right? So think of that metaphor. Always remember that metaphor. You are the doctor. You're going in to diagnose the patient. Think of that metaphor. The next tip was listen to understand. Do not listen just to respond. Listen to understand and ask follow-up questions to understand. And having that understanding will allow you to better show how you can solve the problem or how you are the ideal candidate for the role. And finally, the final tip was do not wait until the very end to ask your questions. You need to be asking your questions throughout the conversation, folks. And that's how you turn the interview into that natural back and forth flow of a conversation where ideas are being exchanged, suggestions are being exchanged, questions are being asked back and forth. Right. So those are the 4 tips. And I hope that helps everyone. If you found those tips helpful, please let me know in the comments, folks. If you found it helpful, if you feel this will be useful to your network, make sure you hit like. By hitting like, that's how it makes it visible to your network. And I might be able to help, people that I don't know who are in your network with these weekly live streams and the job search tips I put out. So without further ado, make sure you put your questions in the comments, folks. And let me know your feedback. Was this helpful? Put it in the comments. Let me know if this was helpful. Say, yes, Dean, this was helpful. If it wasn't helpful, say, Dean, this was not helpful at all. I'm very transparent. I expect all of you to be transparent as well. And just let me know your feedback. And I'm going to go through the questions right now. And let's get this done. So again, folks, let me know if you have any questions. Put in the comments. I'm going to get into this right now. So let's see here. Okay, so Miriam, I'm going to go to your question, Miriam. So Miriam, so firstly, thanks for tuning in, Miriam, and I appreciate your question. So Miriam says, how about job seekers who are changing their career and have not that much experience in that job? How can they stand up among others with more experience? Miriam, excellent questions, folks. So what Miriam is saying is, look, Dean, what if you're a job seeker? You're applying for a position that and maybe you're making a switch into IT, or whatever job, right? You're making a switch. You don't have the specific experience in that field, but you want to stand out, apart from all the other candidates who might potentially have been working in that field for a number of years. So again, thanks for your question, Miriam. Great question. So folks, what I want you to do in this scenario is, I guess, definitely two things right off the top of my mind. So tip number one is you want to look for the transferable skill set. Like, you need to see where your skill set intersects with the position you're applying for, right? I'm going to draw like a quick graph here. Okay, so so that you guys have a visual on this, so that all of you understand, right? Because I'm a visual person myself, so I love seeing when things are visually displayed to me. So look, I'm not Leonardo da Vinci. I'm not a good artist, but here's, hold on, this is too, yeah, can you guys see that? Yeah, okay. So this is your experience. This is all of your experience, right? All of that. I'm going the opposite. I don't know how the weather people do this, but I'm going to try this. So this is all your experience, right? All of this stuff. That's your previous experience. Okay, I got to go. Yeah, right? And this is the position you're applying for. Like, this is the skill set required for the position. This shaded part, this is the transferable skill set. That's what you want to focus on, Miriam, right? You want to focus on the transferable skill set, because that's where you're able to get in on the position and provide something, a transferable skill set from your previous position that you can bring in. So you want to highlight that aspect. You want to highlight this area, folks, the transferable skill set. So what that is for you, like, only you know that. So I hope that visual was helpful. But firstly, Miriam, that's what you want to focus on. You want to focus on, okay, what do I have from my previous experience that I can bring into this job that is transferable? And you want to highlight that. You want to focus on that. And what you want to do next is, in terms of separating yourself from other candidates, you want to show how, yeah, I do come from a different background and different skill set, but that's exactly what makes me unique, because I have this perspective and this skill set from all these other, maybe non-related industries that allow me to bring in a perspective and a completely fresh new perspective to this role. That can be of value to you and your organization. Now, how you can do that, I'm not sure. Like, you got to look into, Miriam, how you can really sell that to the organization, to the interviewer, or to whoever you're meeting with. But that's what I would do. Number one, focus on the transferable skill set. Focus on that. Show how what you're bringing to the table, like that part of your skill set that is transferable and that will be an asset to the organization. And number two is, yeah, despite the fact that you come from a completely different background, why is that background an asset? Why does that make you unique? And why does that allow you to bring a whole new perspective into this new role that you're looking to get into for the organization? So I hope that helps, Miriam. Great question. So I'm going to go through, and I hope that answered your question, Miriam. Let me know in the comments, Miriam, if that answered your question, but thanks so much. Just a comment. So Arjun says, absolutely, this sums up what we should be having, a healthy discussion in the interview. Absolutely, Arjun. Thanks so much for your comment. Arjun also says, wow, a totally different perspective. Okay, I'm happy to hear that, your feedback, Arjun. Definitely. So folks, sometimes, you know what, this simple, see, just like Arjun said, like, it's a totally different perspective, right? This simple mindset shift of thinking of yourself as a doctor going in to diagnose a patient, like that, just a simple mindset shift can entirely change the dynamics of the interview, folks. So make sure you keep this analogy and metaphor in mind. You're the doctor. You're going in to diagnose the patient, because if you don't diagnose the patient, you can't prescribe the right prescription. So thanks for your comment, Arjun. So Abhishek has a great brings up a great point. So Abhishek says, usually in interviews, we don't get to ask questions midway. They usually come up in the end. How can we throw in our questions earlier? Any suggestions? So what Abhishek is, well, I'll just leave that up for a bit more. So what Abhishek is saying, Abhishek's like, okay, Dean, fair enough. All right, you're telling us to ask questions, but usually we don't get an opportunity to ask the questions until right at the end. Like, so how do we throw in our questions earlier? So Abhishek, this is a great point, and a lot of people struggle with this when I advise them on this. And look, the point is, folks, unless it's a highly unless it's something, and speaking as a recruiter, maybe, some roles in the public sector and federal government, highly structured interviews with a very clearly defined agenda, right? But even for those interviews, like, there is no issue if during the course of your conversation You ask a follow-up question. Maybe they ask you, maybe someone asks you, okay, let's pretend I'm a software developer, right? Let's say I'm at an interview. Then the interviewer says, hey Dean, so can you speak to us about your experience working on banking applications? Now, let's say I'm a software developer. I have experience working on banking applications. And I say, yeah, sure, absolutely. And blah, 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 blah. I talk about my experience developing various banking applications. Now, after that's done, that does not mean you shut up, folks. That does not mean you shut up and just wait for the next question. Not necessarily, unless it's, there is no follow-up question at your end. You can counter that with another question of your own. You can say, after you say, okay, and that's my banking experience, then I could say, as a software developer, I could say, by the way, just as a quick question, are you currently working on any banking applications? Like, why is the banking experience important to you? And also, I know I mentioned I was working with technologies XYZ for the banking project. Is that what you're using on this project? Like, there's so many follow-up questions you can ask, folks, and this is how the interview goes back and forth. You do not have to wait for them to say, hey, do you have any questions? That's too late. If you're waiting to ask your questions for right at the end, folks, it's too late, because you know what? When you're asking these questions, and it opens up so many other opportunities for you to highlight yourself and how you can help with this particular project. So again, like I said, so Abhishek, what I'm saying is, after you finish answering the question, you can always ask your own follow-up question right after that, in order to evaluate and again diagnose what exactly the problem is that the company is experiencing. Maybe they ask you about, Abhishek, can you tell us about XYZ? You tell them about XYZ, and your follow-up question could be, why is XYZ important to you? Like, is that something you're using currently at your organization? And they'll be like, oh yeah, Abhishek, yeah, actually, yeah. So the reason we were asking that is, yeah, we're currently working on blah blah blah. It involves XYZ, and that's why we're looking for someone with experience with XYZ. And then they go on to the next question. They ask you an interview question. You respond. You then ask your own, clarifying question. You're probing, folks. You're probing. You're investigating throughout the conversation. You do not wait until the end to do this. Imagine a doctor prescribing you something, but they ask all their questions right at the end of the doctor's meeting. Like, there's no sense to it. There's no logic to it. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, this is like the widely accepted, structure of interviews. People think they have to wait until the end to ask the questions. No, ask your questions throughout the conversation. So hope that helps, Abhishek, and I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments, Abhishek, if that makes sense, what I'm saying. But basically, you do not have to wait until the end to ask the question, folks. Answer the question, then respond with your own question to clarify whatever topic you're speaking about. You don't want the questions to be too random and all over the place. You want to clarify whatever topic you're speaking about. If you're talking about programming languages, answer the question they asked about the programming languages. Follow up with your own question about that topic you're speaking on. This helps build rapport. It also shows them that you're genuinely trying to understand what their situation is and what's going on in the organization. So hope that helps, Abhishek. Priya says, very helpful, a reminder of sorts. Yeah, thanks so much, Priya. I appreciate your feedback, and I'm glad you got got out of it. Priya also says, great advice on the transferable skills. The Venn diagram will stick on you. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. Miriam says, yes, it was very helpful. Okay, awesome. Sounds good, Miriam. I'm glad to hear that was helpful. Rosaria says, hi, Dean, very helpful tips. I want to know, if I don't have language which is benefit to the position, does it affect in getting the opportunity? So Rosaria, I'm not sure. I'm assuming. So in terms of language, I'm not sure what you're asking. Like, I would assume you're a software developer. So sorry, excuse me. Okay, actually, no, you followed up and you said you have, so she followed up and she said she has French language. I have English language as communication. So Rosaria, this is a great question. So what she's asking, folks, is, look, what if the position requires French and English and I only have English, right? And they're looking for someone bilingual, French and English bilingual. Would it affect in getting the opportunity? So now, Rosaria, this is a great question. Now, here's the thing, folks. The French aspect, it might matter, it might not matter. If on the job description it says we need someone French English bilingual, and you are clearly you only speak English, and yet they called you in for the interview, what does that tell you? It tells you that, okay, even though they didn't see French mentioned anywhere in your resume, even though on that initial phone call where they wanted to schedule you for the interview, they didn't clarify whether you speak French, and then they called you in for the in-person interview. What does that tell you? That tells you that maybe French is not that important, right? Maybe that it's a bonus or an asset. So this is where you have to evaluate that, Rosaria. So if it's a position whereby, yeah, they need someone French English bilingual, then if you don't know French, unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that, right? Unless you clarify with them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Hiring Manager, how important is it for you to have someone who speaks French as well? Because my English is really good. Obviously we're having a good conversation right now. I mean, how do you rate my English right now? But I unfortunately do not have the French aspect. How important is the French? Or are you okay with someone who's only able to speak English? Can you let me know your thoughts about that? So, at least have a conversation going, folks. Folks, these are conversations. Like there's no reason to feel bad about asking follow-up questions. You at your end need to clarify and find out more and dig into more about what what their requirements are. So Rosario, I would advise you to just ask them, and be upfront with them. Hey, I have a good command of the English language. I do notice on your job description you have French as a requirement. I don't speak French, unfortunately. Is that a deal breaker for you? Like, how important is the French aspect? They might say, Rosario, they might say, hey, well, you know what, Rosario, I mean, we do prefer someone who has French, but it's not a big deal because we do mostly have, like, we operate out of here in Toronto. We mostly have English speaking clients. The French is for our clients who are out in Montreal, but we already have a team that's French English bilingual. So that might not be an issue. So you never know, folks. Like, this is why you have to ask these clarifying questions. Don't assume and don't give up just because you don't have the exact skill set. So hope that helps, Rosaria. Abhishek says understood. Thank you. And then let's see here. Sorry, I'm not seeing some of the comments here, so I'm just switching over to my another screen. Tejas says this is good. Thanks. All right, sounds good. All right, so looks like that's all the questions, folks. I'm gonna quickly check if anyone has any sent any questions to me in my private messaging, because I know some of you don't want to publicly ask questions. So I don't see anything in my private messages. So if no one has any other questions, folks, I'm gonna wrap it up here, right? And I see Rosaria put a follow-up. So Rosaria says they didn't mention the French requirement, but their client is in France. Yes, Rosaria. So I mean, we can only assume, right, whether or not French is a requirement. I mean, maybe it's a client in France, but they're like an English-speaking company. Maybe they're a multinational company. They primarily operate in English. So don't assume, Rosaria. Still go for it. Have a conversation with them. Clarify that, and ask them, hey, look, I noticed that your client's in France. Like, do you need someone who's a French speaker? Because I only speak English. Just be transparent. Ask them about it. Be upfront, folks. Be professional. Be polite. Be courteous. But be upfront and be transparent in your communication. So looks like that's it, folks. I don't see any other questions. I hope that information was helpful. I wish all of you the best in your interviews and all the best. And again, remember the doctor analogy. You are the doctor. You're going in to diagnose the patient. So be prepared to have a conversation. Again, it's a conversation. They might be asking questions, of course, but you want to be following up with your own questions to better understand the patient, what the illness is, what are the symptoms, so you can prescribe the right solution and show why you are the ideal person or the right doctor to prescribe them the right prescription. So hope that helps everyone. Look, if this was helpful, again, put in the comments, let me know, and make sure you hit like, folks. Hitting likes really means a lot to me, because it helps me understand that what I'm putting out there is valuable to those of you watching and tuning in. And again, every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, I do these weekly live streams. So make sure you mark your calendars. Again, LinkedIn does not always put the notifications, folks. So mark it in your calendars. Every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, which is the time zone here in Toronto, Canada. I go live 11 a.m. Eastern time zone. And for those of you who want to tune in, again, to another reminder, tomorrow, Thursday, June 4th, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time zone, I'm going live with Diana, who was in the comments a bit earlier. We're going to be speaking about job search, tips, advice, and all that stuff. So make sure you tune in. I'd love to see all of you there. So again, thanks so much, folks. Hope everybody has a fantastic remainder of the day. And look, don't just listen to this stuff. Put it into practice, folks. Put it into action. Put it into practice. Try it out and decide for yourself what makes sense for you and what doesn't make sense for you. Thanks so much, everyone. Everyone have a wonderful day and take care. And see you next week, or see you tomorrow and see you next week. Take care. Bye.